Hello again, and welcome back to Storytime with Nana, Lynn, and Glow. We are getting ready to, we're on chapter 31 of Another's Treasure, and I'm hoping to get them all read this evening and get them up tomorrow. So we have only 4 more chapters, and I think we'll be doing fairly well. So let's get on with it, all right? Okay, chapter 31. After church, the sisters drove to Lancaster to meet John for lunch at a local pizza restaurant. Capriccio's Italian grill and kitchen was small, unassuming, and tucked into a storefront. But the pizza was amazing. Elizabeth had been there several times and had taken Martha and Mary once since they'd moved back to Bird in Hand. "I hope this is okay," John said when they arrived. "It's not fancy, but it's one of my favorite restaurants. If you don't like pizza, they have a lot of other Italian dishes." "Oh, we love Capriccio's," Elizabeth said. This was a great choice. Elizabeth decided to go with the Italian salad, while Martha and Mary chose pizza. John ordered a calzone that looked delicious. After they got their food, Elizabeth asked John why he wanted to talk to them. "Well, first of all, I enjoy your company. But secondly, I knew you'd want to know what I found out after I left your house last night." "You have our attention," Martha said. "We've been on pins and needles all morning." John's eyes sparkled with humor. "I drove over to Mr. Barnhart's and asked him a couple of questions. He does have a phone, by the way. I have the number. He doesn't like to hand it out to many people, but I told him I was giving it to you. I explained to him that making you drive all the way over to his house when you've been trying to help him is bad manners. I think he felt a little guilty about that." "I've never known him to feel guilty about anything," Elizabeth said with a smile, "so you're already way ahead of us." "I asked him if he'd told anyone he wasn't going to be home during the time he was going to the pharmacy. At first he said no, but after thinking about it for a while, he realized he'd mentioned it to one person. At the time, he was complaining about his pharmacy starting to charge for delivery." "Let me guess," Elizabeth said. "He complained to the guy that delivers the milk." John pointed at her. "Exactly. No one thinks about the milkman. He's just someone in the background, someone you don't pay attention to." "Well, we certainly pay attention to the person who delivers our milk," Elizabeth smiled to herself at the thought of Phoebe Fisher. "But I know what you mean." She thought she detected a note of admiration in John's voice when he said, "You figured out who the thief was. Tell your sisters how you did it." "Well, I remember leaving Uriah's house and almost tripping over 2 full bottles of milk on the front porch. That meant the delivery man had been there while we were talking about the sword and how valuable it might be. The door was open. The delivery man could have easily heard our conversation through the screen door." John nodded. "Well, I asked Mr. Barnhart about it, and he came to the same conclusion you did. Then, when he realized he'd complained to the same guy about having to pick up his medicines, he put 2 and 2 together. Obviously, while Uriah was gone, the delivery guy went inside and grabbed the sword." "Well, how did he get in?" Mary asked. "Did he break the door?" John shook his head. "Uriah keeps the key under the mat on the front porch." "Don't know how the thief knew. Uriah could have mentioned it, or the guy just looked around and found it on his own. After he took the sword, he relocked the door. That's why Mr. Barnhart didn't notice that it was gone right away." "Tell me you found the sword," Elizabeth said. John smiled. "We found the sword. Will you give it back to Uriah?" Martha asked. "After we release it. Right now it's evidence." "At least now you know I didn't take it," Mary said. John frowned. "Why would anyone think you took it?" Mary laughed. "Ask my sisters." Elizabeth sighed. Anita promised $1,000 to anyone who could get the sword back, and Mary made a joke about that. So when we found out it was stolen and that Mary had gone out, John's hearty laugh only made Elizabeth feel worse. Why had she and Martha jumped to such a silly conclusion? She was determined to show her sister more trust in the future. Frankly, Mary was right. Sometimes Elizabeth still saw her as an irresponsible teenager that she used to be. Mary deserved better, and she probably needed it. "Believe me," Martha said, "we've apologized more than once. Mary has been gracious enough to forgive us. This situation with Anita has made us all a little nuts." Elizabeth had an awful thought. "John, is there a chance that Anita paid this guy to steal the sword?" John shook his head. "The thought occurred to me, too. but he doesn't know Anita. I thought everyone in town knows who the Smuckers are. Well, he knew the Smucker name, of course. It's famous in these parts. But he didn't know Anita or anything about her particular line of the family, he replied. He lives over in Strasbourg. I guess he didn't spend much time here unless he was working. He nodded at Elizabeth. Have you made a final decision about the sword's value? Elizabeth shook her head and sighed. I've taken my research about as far as I can. The next step is to contact an expert in Civil War history. I can recommend some to Anita, but she'll have to pay for it, and their fees are pretty steep. The reason I ask is because I know a guy who might be able to help you. I don't know why I didn't think of him last night. I've known him for a long time. He's a collector of Civil War stuff and very knowledgeable about that period of history. I hope you don't mind, but I sent him some pictures. Oh, I don't mind at all, Elizabeth said. Any assistance you can get is great. But I already talked to an antique dealer who specializes in Civil War memorabilia, and he couldn't help me. Well, my guy might not give us any information either, but I guess it doesn't hurt to ask. After taking a bite of his calzone, he asked, so if the sword turns out to be Jackson's sword, and it's worth a lot of money, what happens next? I mean, it's not Anita's possession. Will you tell Uriah what you find out? Well, I have to. I promised I'd share anything important. Even so, I don't think he'd sell it, Martha said. The rumor is he has lots of money squirreled away, so if so, he doesn't need to get rid of it. To be honest, I think he likes knowing he has something Anita wants. Well, that seems cruel, Mary said. If Anita doesn't find what her father left her, she'll have to sell her home. She'll be broke. If the sword really is valuable, how could Uriah live with himself, knowing she was ruined by a mistake? Well, I'm sorry to say it, Elizabeth said with a sigh, but I doubt he'll care. I haven't seen much compassion in him. I think he's lonely, Mary said. That's his own fault, Elizabeth said. He doesn't have to be alone. According to Mama, people have reached out to him time after time. He chooses to stay holed up in that creepy old house. She was one of the only people he'd talk to. Any idea why he lives like that? John asked. Elizabeth shook her head. I have no idea. He used to be a member of our church, started attending not long after Mary and Martha moved away. He quit going about 9 years ago, I think, not long after he retired. I've been curious about Uriah, too, Martha said. I asked Ruth about him today. Seems he fell in love when he was in his 20s with a woman who married someone else. Well, that's what made him so cranky, Mary asked. Shouldn't he have gotten over that by now? No, there's more. Ruth said he and this woman, Doris, got together again after her divorce. Doris had a teenage grandson named Brandon who lived with her. Uriah and Brandon became very close. To Uriah, he was the son he never had. Doris and Uriah planned to get married. And she married someone else again? Mary guessed. Martha shook her head. Worse. Doris and Brandon went to a family reunion in Nebraska a couple of weeks before the wedding. They asked Uriah to come with them. They wanted to introduce him to their family, but he was too busy with work and decided to stay here. On the way to the reunion, the driver of a semi-truck fell asleep and crossed over the median on the highway. He slammed right into their car, and they were both killed. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Frankly, it was hard to see Uriah as a man some woman could love, but obviously he'd once been a different person. Grief had changed him. That's just terrible, Mary said in a near whisper. She wiped tears from her eyes. It's really awful, John said. No wonder he acts the way he does. I know how hard it is to recover from that kind of heartbreak. He retired not long after that, Martha said, and then he became the man we now know. I think he needs friends. He's shut himself off from everyone. It's made him mean and suspicious. Elizabeth looked at her usually pragmatic sister. Uriah's story had touched her, too. I agree, Mary said. We can do something about that, can't we? Elizabeth shrugged. Only if he'll let us. Ruth said they went by several times after Doris and Brandon died, but Uriah wouldn't talk to them. Down through the years, the church has continued to reach out to him, but he's repelled every attempt. Any idea why he disappeared for a year? Elizabeth asked. No, Ruth didn't know anything about it. She sighed. Getting him to open up to people again won't be easy. Well, he hasn't come up against the Klassen sisters, Mary said with a wink. He doesn't stand a chance. John grinned. I have a feeling life is going to get very interesting for Uriah Barnhart. They'd almost finished lunch when John's phone rang. The sisters listened as he answered it. John's responses to whatever he was hearing were non-committal. After a few minutes, he thanked whoever had called him and hung up. That was my friend, the one that knows about Civil War memorabilia, he said. He's as sure as he can be that the sword never belonged to Stonewall Jackson. Jackson was famous for not using a sword, and there's no record of any other swords besides the one he wore regularly. As far as the value goes, it is from the Civil War, so he said he'd put a price of about $2,000 on it. Of course, that's retail. A seller would probably net around $500 to $1,000. Elizabeth tried to digest this information. If it was correct, she had no reason to believe it wasn't. They were back at square one. At least it was worth a little more than George had suggested. So that's it, Martha said. We have no idea what Warren's riddle means. It looks like we never will. That's no excuse for the way Anita has handled everything, Mary said, but I really wanted to solve this. She looked at Elizabeth. So now what? We give up? Well, I don't see what choice we have, she answered. We've gone through every single item and haven't been able to figure it out yet. Have we really gone through everything? Martha asked. Elizabeth was surprised by her question. I think so. Do you think we missed something? Well, as I see it, there are quite a few things we haven't considered. You know, like frying pans, dish towels, items that couldn't be valuable. I say we go home and get out the list of everything Anita gave us. We'll compare each and every one with the riddle. After we've done that, we can truly say there's nothing left that we can do. Then we can turn this back over to Anita with clear consciences. Elizabeth carefully considered Martha's suggestion. Even though it was the last thing she wanted to do, it made sense. Finally, she said, Okay, you're right. But after that, we walk away, right? I don't want this thing hanging over our heads forever. Martha and Mary nodded their agreement. The group finished their lunch and headed home. Elizabeth should have felt relief since there was surely coming to an end of their research for Anita's missing treasure, but even though she wanted to be happy about it, she just couldn't. It was a mystery she'd wanted to solve. Now it looked as if it wouldn't happen, and that left her feeling unsatisfied. Well. Any ideas? Drop us a comment. We'll talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.